let's talk about what you do at home
Yeah.
to prevent contamination and to be safe for you and your family. What are your actions?
Yeah. So I think we have to think about this like an infectious disease model, right? So when I used to do laboratory research, I actually worked on vaccine research for pathogens. So we had something called a biosafety level 3 laboratory, where everything inside the lab cannot come in contact with anything outside the lab. And anytime there's movement in and out of the lab, there are things you have to do because everything has to be hermetically sealed. So kind of following those kind of procedures. So I think of my house as being hermetically sealed. And hermetically sealed, if you don't know that term, means it's airtight and it's an independent unit, meaning there's no disease vectors coming in, right? So the people that are within the house, in my case, it's my wife and 2 kids. They are in here, I'm in here, and then all the stuff that we have in the house is all hermetically sealed. Now, anytime we have any new vectors, meaning ways for a virus to enter the premise, we have to at the front door decontaminate that before bringing it into the house, right? So then that way we always know that the house and everything in it is still sterile and from the virus sterile and hermetically sealed. It's not sterile as in there's no microbes or anything, but it's from the virus. So for example, if we have to go out for any reason, I've only been out of the house once in the last like 12 days, and that is to go to my kids' school to pick up some folders for them, right? So I went out, I had my outside shoes on, I went to the school, I kept my distance from anyone that was there, 3 or 4 feet at minimum, picked up the stuff, which was in these plastic folders, put it in my car, drove it home, I got out of the car, and then I actually cleaned off those folders with a Clorox wipe in the garage itself, right? And so then you let it sit there and dry so that if there was any contamination on the outside of the inside of the folders, that gets killed off, and then you let it dry, the virus is gone. And then the shoes that I wore to go out, I left them in the garage. And then the outer coat that I wore to go out, I left that in the garage. And then I come back in, the thing that I'm bringing in, the vector that I'm bringing in is now clean. The next thing I need to clean is myself. So my hands, face, after cleaning my hands, and then everything is good, right? So that's anytime you go outside your house and you break that seal, everything that comes back in has to be stopped at the door, sterilized, cleaned, and before it can enter this safe environment. Now, same thing with packages, right? We're getting UPS and Amazon packages every single day. So this is what I do. The package is delivered to the front door. I open the front door. I've got a spray bottle with 70% isopropyl alcohol, and I actually spray the outside of the packages to some degree. It's a nice misting spray, so it kind of covers the package pretty well. Mm-hmm. Then I bring the cardboard box or envelope into the front door, open it, take the things out of it, wipe all of that stuff down, and then set it there to let it dry right by the front door. And then I take the cardboard and all that and I stack it back outside in the garage, mm-hmm. right? So that stuff, I'm not bringing it in and putting it on the kitchen counter and so on. And so the outer packaging got sprayed once, and then after it got sprayed and after things were emptied out, I put those outer packaging in the garage so it's not in the house. And then all of the items inside the box get wiped down, allowed to dry. Once they're wiped down, allowed to dry, then they're perfectly fine. They come into the house and then we use them like normal. Then the area right outside the front door, I just clean the floor as well, doorknobs, all of that stuff, close it, and it's all good to go. Then, of course, wash your hands, wash your face. So it seems extreme, right? It seems extreme, but
especially, yes, I know how you love nature and microbiome. That's one of those things I didn't get a chance to introduce you in the beginning. You're an internationally known microbiologist. You started the Microbiome Lab company, and you are very much into nature and natural bugs and natural probiotics.
Yeah. So that's how serious this is, right? So I'm a guy, number one, who's very big into promoting human interaction, which is really important for our health. from a microbial standpoint, emotional standpoint, and all that. I do not have, outside of this pandemic, I have not had Clorox wipes and isopropyl alcohol in my house. I don't have those things because I don't do this kind of stuff. But this is serious enough that it's taken even me to take those steps of cleaning and sterilizing things, all because we don't want to be a reservoir for this virus, right? So the way this virus goes away, which it can, there is a chance it can go away, is that the human reservoir, because that's where it lives in us. The human reservoir eliminates it through our system. It's not a virus that's coming in from tick bites, it's not in deer in the wild, it's not in mosquitoes, it's not in other animal vectors right now, it's in humans. So if every human most humans have the capability of, eliminating the virus within their own system, their immune system has that capability. So if we stay within a certain confinement, if we don't allow the virus to breed in us, and then we don't transmit that virus, it can go away in a relatively short amount of time, right? So we are doing everything we can to not introduce the vectors into our home, not be a breeding ground for the virus, and certainly not risking spreading it to anyone else, right? So we've had no other, other than the four of us, we've had no other physical human contact. Not even, and this was one of the hardest things. Early in this, about 8 or 9 days ago, my mom wanted to come visit, right?
Same here.
Yeah, she was
Had our
home, right?
anniversary.
Yeah, and I had to say no to my mom, and she cried about it. She's a doctor, right? So there's a couple of things with that. Number one, she's 70, so she's in the high risk population. Number two, she's a doctor. She manages ICUs, so she's in the front lines already to begin with. And number one, we didn't know at that time if we had it or not, because we hadn't been quarantined long enough to show symptoms if we've been exposed. So we didn't know if we were carriers and we could pass it on to her. We didn't know if she was a carrier and could pass it on to us, right? And as difficult as it is to say no to your mom, we had to, right? That's how important and serious this is. We just have to.
I agree. We did the same thing last week, and my mom was also very upset.
Right.
For their own good. And that was one of the questions that you just answered on the Facebook that people asked to ask you, was if the grandparents really should stay away. And the answer is sure. It's for their own good. Even if there is no health issues, just to be safe. Because the key here is that this virus is so new and we don't know so much.
Yep.
That it's just better be safe.
You have to, yeah, and it's almost a duty, right, of everybody. That's our role in this is really important. So this is a really important message for people, is that there are amazing people out there doing really important work that's going to help us all, right? There are researchers studying this and coming up with solutions. They'll probably come up with a treatment for it. They might even come up with an effective vaccine for it. There are doctors on the front line and nurses and health practitioners that are helping the sick. There are pharmacists out there still on the front line giving people the drugs they need. And those are the heroes in all of this. But every one of us plays a really important role in this. This is one of the first times in my lifetime that I can remember where we have a global issue, and as a global community, every one of us has a huge impact, right? Because if one of us is a carrier and we are nonchalant about it, and we're not quarantining ourselves, we're not doing the social distancing, one person can spread it to 200 people in a matter of a couple of days. That's how fast it moves, right? That just happened in Wisconsin. That was a doctor, and not to demonize the doctor, he didn't know he had it. He didn't have any symptoms, and that's one of the scary things about this, is you are very contagious for a while without having any symptoms. Mm-hmm. And he went to work and doing his thing, which is important work. And then it turns out he was positive for it, and they traced it to 200 people that are now getting tested and have to be in isolation to wait and see if they have it, right? That's how fast it spreads. So all of us have an impact. All of us play a very important role. Every decision you make to distance yourself from people, to not become a reservoir, to not become a vector, really helps the global community.
I agree. Totally there with you. So I'm going to ask you the next question. I'm not sure if you know the answer because I looked into the research myself and I'm not sure what the answer here. Can you have this virus, get sick or not get sick from it, and then have it again? Can you?
Good question. So we don't have a study on that. What's really interesting about it is there are some cases that I found out of China that showed that there were some reinfections in people. Now, that we have to take that with a real strong, big grain of salt, because we don't know how accurate those reports are, and we don't know if the reinfection was a co-infection with, let's say, influenza or something else.
Mm-hmm.
We do know from a published study that the virus can remain in a person even after they're done with the infection for a couple of weeks. So there was a recent study that looked at people that were COVID-19 positive, and then they followed and they kept looking at viral titers in the person's respiratory tract for 10, 12, 14 plus days. And they found that even after your symptoms are gone, they can still find virus in you up to 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, right? So it seems like it hangs around for a while. But will it reinfect? It's still unclear. Typically, with coronaviruses, with other coronaviruses, you can't. You get a pretty good amount of immunity to it, and then your body can deal with it, pretty easily if you get re-exposed. So you will have natural immunity. So right now, our best guess is to go by what we know from other coronaviruses, which is if you've got it and your body's dealt with it and you're done with it, you're no longer contagious, you have some immunity and protection against it.
We'll hope that's the case.
Yeah.
And in the old times, we used to put the sick kids together in the same bed. If one of them had chickenpox, this is not that type of thing right now. It's a different kind of virus, and for our society and our planet, it's not one of those where.
No, and let me bring up a question, because I've had people ask me this. Also, they've said, if it's not a particularly deadly virus, and it's not, which is a good thing. It's the mortality rate will probably shake out to be around 1%. Now that is a big problem for the healthcare system, because we won't be able to handle that kind of mortality rate. But nonetheless, people are saying, it's not an Ebola, it's not even a SARS or MERS. SARS had about a 16% mortality rate. MERS had a 30% mortality rate, which are really scary. So then they're like, isn't it better if just everyone gets it, and then we've got herd immunity against it, and we just kind of let it spread? Well, the first big problem with that is the healthcare system won't be able to handle that, right? If we had... That's the biggest thing. That'll implode the entire system, because it spreads faster than the flu. And so if you think about the flu, just in this flu season alone, we've had almost 40 million infections, right? And because it spreads far faster than the flu, if we don't take interventions and put restrictions, we'll probably get around 60 to 80 million infections of COVID-19. 1% of those people having mortality, and then somewhere around 13% of those people needing hospitalization. That is 50 times more than we have hospital beds. So we can't handle that, right? So that's number one reason why we can't just let it spread and let everyone get it. The second reason is because there is a risk, because this is a new virus, that it mutates. And if it's allowed to spread in many, many different hosts, over time, it can mutate to become more virulent, or it can mutate to become more lethal. And that's a danger. We don't know that.
That's right. Important. But yeah, you should emphasize what you're saying. Make it a little more simple for my viewers.
Yeah. So when you think about viruses are these very simplistic things. They are, this particular virus is called an envelope virus. So think about a fatty acid envelope. It's basically a fat bag, if you will. Inside it is an RNA. It's an RNA virus. So it's got its RNA that codes for everything it needs. For its outer shell, for the spike protein is the protein it uses to enter the cells, for RNA to take over our own machinery because it uses our machinery to replicate itself. So all of those things are contained in this little fatty capsule. Now, as it injects its RNA into our cells and that RNA takes over our cellular machinery, during that process of replication, it can create mutations. And that mutation can make new versions of the virus that is more virulent, that becomes closer to the MERS type of coronavirus, or even the original SARS type of coronavirus, which has a mortality rate which is 16 to 30%. Right? So imagine a pathogen that is as contagious as COVID-19, which spreads so easily, but has a mortality rate of 16 to 30%. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people dying in that case, right? Globally. So
information that
yeah, it is so dangerous, and we don't know, whether or not we don't know that won't happen. That is in the realm of likelihood if it's allowed to spread and mutate and grow in many, many different hosts. So we have to remember that. So that's one of the reasons why we have to control this to a significant degree. The second reason, the third reason really, the first one is that the system can't handle it. Number two is it could mutate to become more vicious. Number three is we can't allow it to become endemic, right? So it's a pandemic right now. Most people are now familiar with that term, which means it's a disease that's ravaging multiple countries. And when it becomes endemic, means it becomes a really concrete part of our ecosystem, right? So it never goes away. Like the flu is endemic; it comes back every single year. Colds and typical colds, norovirus, rotavirus, all these things are endemic. They always come back every year. If this comes back every year, it adds on to the flu season, right? So now we've got an influenza season from the fall to the spring that's infecting somewhere around 40 million people every year. Then on top of that, we've got COVID-19 infecting another 60 million people every year. We will go through this madness every single year if it becomes endemic, right? So that's another danger. We need to kind of knock it out of our society, knock it out of our ecosystem. So those are the big reasons why we can't just let it spread. Because I get a lot of younger people, I'm seeing that online, I'm seeing that from news reports, of just like, whatever, this doesn't hurt us, 80+% of people will be fine, we just go about our time. No, this is going to become a serious global issue every single year. Life as we know it would change.
I agree. Hopefully, they are working on making the medication and possibly vaccines. So yeah, we have to be looking at it as some kind of point where things have to change.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to touch the topic of vaccination because it's really not black and white.
Right.
I know there's two different sides that are like ready to kill each other, pro and against. There's way more to the left and right. There's so much more in the gray area. So not it's a topic for a different conversation.
Yeah.
What I do want to talk about now, really important for my tribe, is what those with immunocompromised conditions like Crohn's, colitis, other gut stuff, because most of my clients are chronic gut and hormone people.
Yeah.
What do they do? What's the best way to prevent? How do they handle if they do get that virus? And I know I brought up the study and I try to spread the information about ibuprofen, and most of the NSAIDs now actually probably exacerbating the condition.
Yeah.
There's some information that elderberry syrup can cause that cytokine storm. So I do want my clients and my tribe to hold off with elderberry syrup, but the other immune system modulators, I do still recommend to continue. I need you to give me like your scoop on everything immunocompromised related and this virus now.
Yeah. In immunocompromised people, the cytokine storm is a real danger. Of course, the lack of or the reduced initial defense against the virus is also a big issue as well. So, when a virus first infects, we're counting on our innate immune system to go after it. It's things like macrophages, dendritic cells, natural killer cells, cytotoxic T cells. These are kind of the first responders to that initial infection. One of the problems with the first responders is they're also very non-specific, so they will damage some tissue through the inflammatory response, but they are extremely important in controlling the initial phase of the infection so that the virus doesn't really spread really dramatically in a short period of time. Now, one of the reasons why there's a long incubation period for this virus is because its targets in the body are more finite, right? The types of tissues that it goes after are more finite than other viruses that can infect many different types of tissues, because it's looking for this one receptor called the ACE2 receptor. And not all of our tissues express the ACE2 receptor. So it gives our body time to figure out that there is an invading virus. And then there's this battle going on between the virus replicating itself fast enough and our immune system coming in and finding that infected cells and free virus and bringing it under control. Now, a few things that I think that are really important, and again, I think the important disclaimer here is none of these things have been tested against COVID-19. None of these are treatments or prevention for COVID-19. We're really just talking about general health. Because that's what we have to work with right now, right? We have to count on our own immune systems to deal with this because there is no treatment for this. And so looking at our own immune system, if you are immunocompromised, one of the most important things you can do, to me, is increase the support for those first line defenders in your immune tissue, in your immune system. So that's the natural killer cells, the cytotoxic T cells, the dendritic cells, and macrophages. Dendritic cells and macrophages, one of their main energy sources, and one of the things that increases their proliferation in the body, is the production of short-chain fatty acids in the gut, which is a crazy connection to make. So what your gut bacteria in your colon is making acts as the most prolific source of energy and proliferation for these cells that are swimming around all over your lung tissue and upper respiratory tract looking for this kind of virus infection. And so you getting in your fiber, your prebiotics, your resistant starches, those kind of things will really help those types of immune cells stay equipped, stay energized, and proliferate to be able to go around and protect your system, right? So that's an important thing. Then there's a number of compounds that can help with the T cells. So probiotics really help with increasing T cell proliferation. A lot of that is from interacting with the Peyer's patches in the ileum. So when probiotic bacteria go, and if they can interact with those Peyer's patches, it increases the proliferation of T lymphocytes, or T cells that can go around and find these kind of viruses and help control them. So it becomes really important to take your probiotics and take your prebiotics and all your fibers and things that you normally take. You might even want to look at increasing some of those during this time. There are antiviral compounds that have shown to have antiviral function because they increase natural killer cells and they increase cytotoxic T cells. One of those is like olive leaf extract. I take a product called Olivirex that's made by Biobotanical. I use that typically when I travel and all that, and of course I use it now as well. That's really important. The olive leaf extract has been able to show that. Mushrooms have been able to show an increase in natural killer cell function, cytotoxic T cell function, so beta-glucans from mushrooms, or just a mushroom complex you could take. Those two things are really important. Of course, zinc, magnesium, boron, all have been shown to improve the function of those kind of antiviral defense component of your immune system. So those tend to be really important as well. So upregulate those intakes. And again, it's all about just making your system healthier, more resilient. warmth and heat really helps, right? So one of the reasons why we get, and the main reason why we get a fever, is our body, our immune system creates the fever because these kind of viruses don't do well in heat. It slows down their replication. It can even kill them if we're warm enough. So I've been sitting in my sauna a lot. I have a kind of a portable far infrared sauna. So if you have one of those, do that. If you don't have a sauna, I wouldn't go out to the gym or sit in the sauna now, but at home, what you could do is do some good low-grade exercise to get yourself warm, and then hop in a warm shower. So you're getting 10 to 15 minutes a day of your body temperature elevating, which is a good thing for your system. It helps your immune system, and it helps bring down virus replication as well. So, and again, one of the things that's important is with this time of year, the thing that's still going around is the common cold, is influenza. Those things are still out there, and in fact, at this point, still more prevalent than COVID-19. So you don't want to catch those either, because those are just going to bring down your immune system, right? So just kind of up-regulating your resilience, up-regulating your immune defenses really helps. There's another product I use that has been shown to actually have clinical trials, well done published clinical trials showing improvements in viral defenses against the common cold and so on. And it's a product called Epicor. It's a EPICOR. It's one I use all the time when I travel. I use it, of course, now at a higher dose. It's a fermented extract. And that fermented extract, it's a yeast fermentation extract. It's an interesting story. They were making that fermented extract, or they still are, for animal feed as a nutrient additive because it helps the animals' immune systems. And they found that this company has an office, and then they have a production facility. The office is completely separate from the production facility. After about 2 years, they started noticing a pattern where the office had a normal number of sick days that people were taking throughout the year, as you would find average in the US, but the production facility had almost no sick days. Right? And in fact, they had news reports, like reporters coming in doing investigations of why is there a big discrepancy between these two? And then they realized that in the production facility, this stuff was aerosolizing, and the workers were breathing it in constantly and getting it into their system, and it was providing them significant immune protection through the cold and flu season. And so then they started doing clinical studies on humans and finding out that, hey, this has really amazing protective benefits. So that's why they built a human version of the product. So that's another one I would take as well. So we cannot forget our basics, our basic nutrition. One of the things I've done personally is, to me, this is like, since I'm staying put in one place, I'm not out and traveling like crazy, I'm focusing more on my nutrition. I'm focusing more on my diet, trying to eat healthier. This is a good opportunity for us to kind of all elevate our resilience and elevate our health and wellness as we go through this process. Because one of the things that a virus like this targets is they target the weakest in our population. It targets the ones that are more inflamed. It targets the ones that have more chronic illness. It targets the ones that are older. And so for that reason, it gives us an interesting opportunity to reflect upon our own health and start to improve that.
Beautiful. Those are all really great tips. Thank you. You are really grateful. We are very, very, very grateful for your time. I know you're super busy, and I know you're taking the time out of your day for us. I can't even thank you enough.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Can you share a little bit about the news with your company, the newest and the greatest?
Yeah. One of the most exciting products that we've launched recently is our Mega Omega. This is a fish oil product, and you might ask the question, well, do we really need another fish oil product on the market? Because there are a lot. And in fact, you're right. There are a lot of fish oil products if you're thinking that. Now, what we always do is we look for areas that are underserved, problems that are not adequately being addressed by products that are out there in the market. When we start looking at inflammation, and that's our big area of focus, is systemic inflammation and the chronic damage that it does. In fact, virtually every chronic disease can be tagged back or traced back to chronic inflammatory response in the body, right? That is damaging. In fact, take this COVID-19. This particular virus looks like it basically, targets people with chronic inflammation. Because when you have chronic inflammation, you express more of the receptor that this tends to bind to. So you become more susceptible to these types of things. So we've always been focused on chronic inflammation. And so we've been doing it through the gut and the microbiome, because leakiness in the gut is a big source of chronic inflammation. But then as we look at the different inflammation pathways, we've got this immune pathway through interleukins and cytokines from leaky gut that is very prevalent. But then we've got this other pathway called the arachidonic acid pathway. And this pathway is called the LOX and the COX pathway. And this pathway is related to tissue damage. So when you get damage on your tissue, whether it's cut on your skin or you tear something on the inside, any kind of tissue damage will lead to inflammatory response and will lead to pain response. And that inflammatory and pain response is driven by this arachidonic acid pathway. And as we dig more into the research, we find that this pathway, the cytokine response, the immune response that we've been working on, is a very prevalent response, but this pathway is equally present and drives inflammation in a significant way as well. And then there's lots of studies coming out showing the correlation between activation of this pathway and chronic illness. And so we started going, okay, are we dealing with this pathway with everything we have here? And we might be to a certain degree, but not really in any profound way. So we started looking at solutions for dealing with this arachidonic acid pathway. And the best things, or the best studies, are certain types of fatty acid, in particular fish oil. But it's not the versions of the fish oil that most people are used to. So DHA, which tends to be the prolific component of most fish oils, is really good for your brain and other peripheral tissues, but it doesn't do much with this particular inflammatory cascade. What you need is more EPA, more DPA, and something called PRMs, pro-resolving mediators.
Yes.
These are the things that really dramatically bring down this inflammatory cascade that is very present in the gut and in other parts of the body as well, but it's predominantly in the gut. So we started finding that there's a lot of data showing that these types of fatty acids really bring down this source of inflammation. And so that's the two things we started looking at is, okay, if we can bring down this leaky gut-related inflammation and we can bring down this arachidonic acid inflammation, then we're really addressing the problem as a whole. Because if somebody has prevalent inflammation through this pathway and you've stopped this, you're doing a lot of good, but you're still not resolving the full problem, right? Or vice versa. You stop this and you still have this, you're still not resolving the full problem. So that is one of the most exciting products that we've launched recently. It's called Mega. It's got high levels of EPA, DPA, and pre-resolving mediators. I think it's the only fish oil in the market with pre-resolving mediators. It's the first one. Most people have not even heard of what the hell that is.
Right. It's relatively new research, and it's looking. I've been looking into it, and it's looking real. And you already have the product ready to go.
Yep, to go. It launched about 3 weeks ago. So yes, it's out there in the market, and we're already starting to see. We get to try it on a lot of our patients that we work with in the Chicago clinic. So we're already starting to see in a lot of inflamed people, Crohn's, colitis type of people, that they're getting really interesting responses because we're bringing down the inflammation associated with the tissue damage that's going on in these conditions, right? Because remember, these conditions have a lot of different factors to it. One of the really important factors is the lining of the epithelial lining is getting constantly damaged. And that is tissue damage. And that the response to that from the body side is through the arachidonic acid pathway. So now we are dealing with that as well, and then we're getting better responses.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear. And of course, everything in Kiran's line of products you could get from us. We are going to offer a generous discount. Everything will be posted in the email and probably even under this video once we get it posted into YouTube, because obviously broadcast is not happening to them. Right. I saw some people complain that I thought it was me, but it's not. It's just everyone.
It is. Yeah, it's everyone. I've been doing this. I've been doing so many interviews over the last week, and We've been having problems. I think a lot of people are home and are on the internet right now. If there's, because I do have a couple of more minutes, so I do want to talk a little bit about some silver linings here that I think are really important for us all to reflect on, right? Number one, I am considering this, and I'm a big, almost a fan, not to sound, morbid, of pandemics. That's actually what got me into science. If you've heard my origin story before, it was the movie Outbreak with Morgan Freeman and Dustin Hoffman, a couple decades ago, that I saw in my first day at university, and decided I wanted to go into microbiology and focus on virology. And actually, my goal was to work for the CDC to chase down pandemics. Now, fortunately, I didn't end up in that route. I do what I do, which I'm very grateful for. But there's a big part of me that's like really itching to be more involved in this pandemic, because that's what really got me into science. But one of the things I'm realizing right now is that this pandemic that we're going through right now is a dress rehearsal for something much worse to come. Right. And one of the reasons I got into the idea of pandemics, even as a 19-year-old, is I realized even then that the thing that's really going to bring us to our knees is going to be a virus. Right. It's not terrorists. It's not, immigrants. It's not all the things that we get scared about or our politicians try to scare us about. Those are problems to some degree, but most of those can be easily handled. We don't necessarily need more warships. We don't need more missiles and bombs to fight against each other. It's going to be a simple thing like a piece of RNA. But think about how simple this virus is. It's a little tiny microscopic fatty envelope with RNA in it. That little thing is bringing us to our knees, right? As cool as we think we are, all the amazing technology we have, all those warships and gunships that are parked in these warehouses right now have zero utility as this thing is killing off our population, right? So let's get some perspective on what our real dangers are in this world that we live in. Over the course of history, it's been pandemics that wipe out the human race in large chunks. So that perspective is really important. Investment in science is really important. We cannot support politicians and people that cut the NIH's budget, that cuts the CDC budget, that eliminates pandemic response groups. These are, not to get political, but these are so important. This is what is going to take us down. And this dress rehearsal is really important because we are dealing with a highly contagious virus that is not particularly lethal, right? So that is where we have a silver lining, is that this is very contagious, but not particularly lethal. If we were dealing with a MERS that was as contagious as this, we would have 1 million deaths right now already, right? And that is coming around the corner. It's not that it won't happen. It's just a matter of time. So our ability to respond to this, our nature is giving us a chance to do a dress rehearsal with a virus that is very contagious, that is spreading like crazy, that is dangerous, but not anywhere as bad as it can be. It can be 10 times worse. And that 10 times worse virus is around the corner somewhere. So how we respond to this, what we learn from this, is going to decide the fate of the human race when the next big one comes, right? So let's keep that in mind as well. The other really interesting silver linings are the environment is getting cleaned up. People are not going outside. Factories aren't running. People aren't driving in cars. There are satellite pictures over Wuhan, China, that shows pollution completely cleaned up, right? The air quality has changed completely. The water in the canals of Venice have become crystal clear in just a few weeks. Animals that have never been seen over the last few years in the waters in the canals of Venice are back, and they're swimming around and enjoying that natural environment. So this is kind of for us to think about, that what have we been doing to our world? This is almost like nature punching us in the gut and giving us a reset, going, hey, you guys have gone too far. We are polluting the world. We are destroying our natural environments. And just a few weeks of humans stopping and slowing down what we normally do, you start to see the earth clearing up. I mean, that's an amazing perspective to have, right? So maybe as we come out of this, we can start dialing back some of those things that we do that that have such a negative impact on the world. And to me, this other thing that's really important to reflect on is one of the biggest dangers that we have in the US right now from this virus is the number of chronically ill people that we have, right? 6 out of 10 Americans, 60% of Americans, 60% of our 321 million population has at least one chronic illness. This virus and many other viruses like this target people with inflammatory conditions and chronic conditions, right? It targets the weakest in the herd because that's where it has the best chance of replicating and acting as a reservoir. And so it gives us the perspective that, wait a minute, if we didn't have such a sick population, we would be less vulnerable to these types of infections. So we got to take note of that and go, okay, when we come out of this, let's come out being stronger, each individual personally, being healthier. Maybe we need to revisit all the things that we're doing on a large scale that are really unhealthy for us, like our food system, our environment, and all of these things. It gives us a chance to look at all the things that have been damaging our system, making us weaker, making us more vulnerable, and come out of this being more resilient, right? So again, this is all a dress rehearsal for something worse that could be more than likely coming down the road. We need to become stronger to be able to deal with that when it does come, right? So, and then the last thing is, this really makes you appreciate human interaction, right? I mean, I haven't seen, aside from my little, family that I have here at home with me.
Beautiful family.
And they're absolutely wonderful, but we might kill each other by the end of this whole thing if the virus doesn't get us, which, we'll see which one's more dangerous. But, I haven't physically seen another human in like 15 days now, or 12 days, I think, somewhere around there. And I'm itching to like hug somebody, and I'm itching to sit down with people and have dinner and talk. And we got to really learn to appreciate those interactions that we take for granted when we have them, and so that human interaction is so important. We have to appreciate one another. We're all in a global crisis and everybody plays a role. We can't emphasize that enough.
Beautifully, beautifully said. And I'm a hugger. So yes.
Absolutely, yes. You're one of the last people I got to hug because I saw you, a month ago? So
totally. And we are going to wrap up, and I'm forever grateful for this. And Kiran was here with us, the brilliant microbiologist. Listen to every word he said. And I'm here, guys, with you. I help you heal your gut so you could have better immunity and you could have that gut that's not going to be affected, and immunity that's going to fight.
Be resilient. That's my message. Let's get more resilient.
Beautiful message. We'll stop the recording.